the officer had confirmed to me that person who was lying on the pavement had perished. I'm placed under arrest, of course, put into the back of the police car. I could hear it come over the police radio that there was another passenger in that vehicle who had been pronounced dead at the scene.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, a free, safe space for people to share and learn from others' experiences with mental health and addictions. I'm Todd Rennebaum, suicide attempt survivor and recovering substance abuser. I'm so glad you came. This is another amazing episode with another amazing person. In this episode, I'm speaking with Martin Lockett. He is a counselor, a public speaker, an author. He's got a bunch of education and stuff. And he got it all while in prison for 17 and a half years for killing 2 people while driving intoxicated. Martin has taken his life, turned it around, and doing good for people and helping people that are possibly on the same road of making the same mistakes he made. And I find that just fascinating and noble. This episode will also be on YouTube on my channel, Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, along with some older episodes from way back to ones not that long ago at all. I just started the YouTube channel, so if you look and you're like, wow, there's not many subscribers or viewers here, it's true. There isn't. But I only started it about 2 or 3 weeks ago, so and it's a whole other beast. I don't know exactly what I'm doing there yet, but the conversations and videos are great, so go check those out. If you want to keep up with the podcast, you can find me on Instagram at Bunny Hugs Podcast. I'm always posting stuff on there. Sometimes it's just memes and inspirational words, and sometimes it's about the podcast and whatever. So you can go there, or you can go on Bunny Hugs and Mental Health on Facebook or on TikTok, Bunny Hugs Podcast. Also, just want to say hello to all my new listeners. There's been quite a few over the last 6 months or so. I just got some analytics from Spotify, and it's been a busy year. So if you've been listening right from the very beginning, or this is your first episode, welcome. And I'm very excited you're all here. So many people have gotten things from my guests, and it's so amazing. And if you think other people might get something from my guests, whether it's just information or to feel related to, please go ahead and let everyone you know about it. Yeah, I consider this a mental health service, and I consider my guests just speaking and coming on here as a mental health service. So please utilize this free mental health service, let other people know about it, and enjoy. But anyway, without further ado, I give you Martin Lockett.
So I grew up in Portland, Oregon in the 80s. And, for anyone who is somewhat familiar with Portland today, where we have the whole, keep Portland weird mantra and the naked bike rides and things like that. Let me just say it was vastly different in the 80s. There were gangs coming up from California. They were fighting for drug territory. I remember there were drive-by shootings almost every other night. It just became routine. When I was a kid, there was prostitution rampant. I mean, it was a tough place to live. But thankfully I had 2 very loving parents who took care of us. My dad worked at the shipyard. He worked at Freightliner to support the family. Mom stayed home to take care of his kids. I have a twin brother and I have 2 older sisters. And, by all intents and purposes, we were a normal working class family in my estimation. And so things were pretty normal until I got to high school. So I was a pretty shy kid. And I got to high school, and it's imperative that you have people to hang out with. You have other kids that you can hang out with. You don't want to be by yourself. So I remember this kind of led to me hanging out with some kids who happened to live in my neighborhood, but I had not ever met them. And so I'm hanging out with these guys, and they're doing things like smoking cigarettes and smoking weed and skipping school and things like that. And I remember at age 14, we had gone to a house party. Kids were throwing a house party. And the kids at this party, they were 15, 16, 17 years old, so a little bit older. And these were the popular kids. Everybody wanted to hang out with these kids. We're hanging out with these kids because a guy that we knew he knew everybody, right? So we were able to hang out with them. And I remember he handed my brother and me a couple cans of beer, and he went off into the crowd to go, mingle with other kids. And I remember my brother and I were standing there and we're looking at each other, and we're like, there's no way we can drink these because mom and dad would absolutely kill us. But we also had kind of done the mental calculation, if you will, that if we don't drink, like, we're not going to be accepted with these kids. So like we have to drink. So I remember I cracked it and I took a few swigs and I almost gagged because it was so bitter and disgusting. But I remember the feeling I got where, my chest heated up and then all my inhibitions came down. And I remember that party, I just freely mingled with people and talked to girls without fumbling over my words, breaking out in a cold sweat, right? And so I was like, finally, I'm able to break out of my shyness and to talk to people freely, and like, this is great. It was like a miracle drug. And so for the next couple of years, that was pretty much my relationship with alcohol, if you will. It was at parties and social settings and things like that. And then around age 16, things turned for me because now I'm looking at my life beyond high school and thinking about a career and all these things. And I am feeling not very confident in myself, not because of something inherently wrong with me necessarily, but because where I live, where I come from, nobody around me is, doing anything great, going off to college, getting a degree, working in downtown, wearing a suit to work. None of that were exemplified for me. So I am feeling pretty low in my life, and I struggle with my identity, and I felt depressed, and so mental health and struggles like that were not any. We never talked about those things in my household, right? Just never. They never came up. So I manage in the only way that I know how, which is to drink. So now I'm drinking before I go to school at 7 in the morning. I'm drinking during my lunch breaks. I'm drinking after school. I would come home some days, lock myself in my room, drink a 40 ounce of malt liquor, and listen to sad music at age 16, and just like wallowing in self pity about my life. And so this is when my dependence on alcohol really took hold, and it persisted for the next several years until I got into the criminal justice system.
Hmm. How did you manage to get your hands on alcohol at that age?
So mainly, we would my buddies and I would hang out outside of the store, and pretty much like anybody going into the store, we could give them $1, and they would buy us whatever alcohol we wanted. I mean, we did this every day. Sometimes we
Hmm.
would steal it. We would go to the corner store and we would steal like the bottles of Mad Dog 2020 and Night Train and all that, rock gut, cheap wine. But mainly, we would get people to buy it for us.
Hmm. Yeah, I grew up in a small town, a very small town, so we had to be very careful because like who? Oh, it's my friend's parents. It's like,
Right.
oh god, or or friends of my brother, and then they would tell my brother, and then my brother would tell me. But yeah, so yeah,
And that wouldn't
interesting.
work too well.
No, no. So about what age was it that you um you got involved in the crash?
So for this, I was 24 years old,
Oh.
and I had been drinking and driving at this point every day. Even though, and so let me just say, so for
Hmm.
context, I was working at a warehouse. I was going to community college in the evening because I wanted to become a nurse at this point. I had my GED. I wanted to become a nurse. And, I moved out of my parents' house. I'm living with a woman in Washington State and paying my bills. And so on the surface, it looked like my life was in order, right? But
Hmm.
I had never, even though I had all these external things going, I never addressed the underlying causes of my addiction, which is really, me, instead of seeking external validation, right? For me to actually have a healthy self concept of Martin and who Martin is, and what direction in life does Martin want to go, and what validates Martin internally, right? Not externally, but internally. I never figured those things out. I never given them any attention. So those factors were still there, and they were driving my addiction at this point. And I made it okay to drink and drive, because I had all these other things in my life that I could point to say, well, things are not really that bad, right? As we do, in our addiction. So this takes us into New Year's Eve of 2003. I had gotten off work early because of the holiday. So I remember I went straight to the liquor store. I bought a fifth of gin. I then went to my parents' house, hung out with my twin brother, drank the alcohol over the course of 2 or 3 hours. And then we decided we would go to a house party that night, a guy we had gone to high school with. So I went back to the store after I drank that entire fifth of gin by myself, because every single day, like clockwork, I would go to the store and I buy four 24-ounce cans of Old English, because it was like 8.3% or something, and I was looking to get the most bang for my buck, if you will. So I bought four 24-ounce cans of that. I drank that over the course between about 5 and 8 o'clock that night. Went and hung out with another buddy before we went to the party. The three of us, my brother, me, and him, drank a pint of Hennessy between us, kill some time. Then we go to the party at about 11 o'clock.
Wait, wait,
Get to
wait.
the
You
party.
you drank a fifth, 24 beer, and what was the other thing you said?
Four 24-ounce cans of beer. So 96 ounces of beer, a fifth of
Oh,
gin, and then a pint of Hennessy between the three
oh.
of us.
I'm not even sure how big a fifth is. I'm Canadian, so I got.
Oh, so I think it's a little less than a liter.
Gotcha. Okay, we call that a
It's a little
Mickey.
less. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
gotcha.
So, so yeah. So I drank a Mickey, the four 24-ounce cans of beer, and a pint of Hennessy, and then we get to the party, and then we drink more alcohol, of course, because it's a party and we got to drink, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we
New
celebrate
Year's.
the new year.
Woo!
It's New Year's, yes, indeed. Got to leave 2003 with a bang. So we do that. We celebrate the new year. Everything is great. We leave the party at about 12:15 a.m. The three of us get into my vehicle. I take my friend home without incident. Get back onto the freeway to take my brother home. And at this point, Todd, I'm just extremely exhausted because I've been drinking all day, and I think I'd had one meal at about 4 o'clock that afternoon. So, I need to get home. I just want to go to sleep. I know I didn't have to work the next day, so I want to get home. So on the freeway, I speed to about 80 miles an hour on the freeway. And, this makes my brother nervous. And he's like, hey, man, you should slow down. The police are out, it being a holiday and all. I thought, well, okay, that makes sense. So I slow down, exit the freeway. Now we're driving in a residential area. And again, I get impatient and I just want to get him home. So I begin to speed to about 60 miles an hour. And my brother starts to yell at me and he's like, man, slow down before we crash. And I tell him, calm down. I know what I'm doing. I've got this. I've done it 100 times. But just to keep him quiet, I went ahead and slowed down. So we continue to drive for about 10 minutes. And I'm just about to get into the left hand turning lane to drop him off at our parents' house. And then he suddenly realizes he's all out of cigarettes. So he said, hey, man, let's go up the road so I can get some cigarettes. I'm all out. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't want to make one more stop. I just want to go home and go to sleep. So we drive for a couple blocks. And then about 2 blocks from that point, there's an intersection. And the little mini mart we need to get to is just beyond the intersection. And so I'm looking up at the light, and the light is yellow. And I knew there was no way I was going to make this light. As intoxicated as I was, I knew there was no way I was going to make this light. But I just want to get the stupid cigarettes and go home. So I immediately punch the gas and I become tunnel vision where I don't see anything to the right or left of me. And just within 3 or 4 seconds, boom, just this earth shattering crash. And then I remember everything seemed to go in slow motion. The airbag envelops my face and it feels like I'm being suffocated by a parachute. My car comes to a slow winding halt. And my first instinct was to look at my brother to see if he's okay, and he's starting to move a little bit. So I'm relieved that we're both alive. And a guy comes rushing up to the driver's side door frantically. Are you guys okay? Are you guys okay? Yeah, we're okay. I tell them, and I step out of my vehicle, and I'm so consumed with my superficial items like my car because it conveyed importance and value onto me. So I'm walking around my vehicle and I'm looking at my custom rims that are destroyed. The entire front end is the car is totaled, and I'm not even thinking about the people I just hit. And then my brother gets my attention and he points across the street where the car had spun about 70 feet before it stopped. And he said, "Hey, man," he said, "I think I see somebody lying down on the pavement over there, and it doesn't look like they're moving." So in that moment, it starts to sink in the magnitude and the severity of what I had just done. But of course, you can't process anything because here comes lights and sirens everywhere, rushing to the scene. I'm still drunk, of course. The policemen are there. They're talking to me. The first responders, the fire department, they're trying to extract the passengers from the vehicle very carefully. Um, they take my brother a few feet away to interview him, and like 5 minutes into that interview, the officer had confirmed to me what I had pretty much known to be true, which was that person who was lying on the pavement had perished. And he told me that another person was being transported to the trauma center just blocks away. So I'm placed under arrest, of course, put into the back of the police car. We head for downtown for processing. And from the back seat, I'm listening to the police radio because you could hear a lot of chatter about the crash, right? And about 10 minutes into that ride, I could hear it come over the police radio that entirely unbeknownst to me, there was another passenger in that vehicle who had been pronounced dead at the scene. So there's two people dead, I know. There's one person in very critical condition who could still lose his life on one hand. And on the other hand, I'm keenly aware of the laws in Oregon that require for a DUI manslaughter that require 10 years in prison day for day, which means you cannot get out a single day early for good behavior, working a job, getting an education. None of that matters for this crime. It is 10 years day for day, and I've got two manslaughters. So I know I'm going to prison at 24 years old for roughly the next 20 years. So I remember we drove past my family's house, the block, and I look down the street and I see the house one last time, and my heart sinks so deep because I know I'm not going to see that house for about the next 20 years.
Man, I am so sorry, Martin. I can't even imagine. Like, yeah, I would have been in shock and denial. Like, I don't know how I would have, man. Like, and the upsetting part for me, well, there's a lot. I mean, the whole thing's upsetting, but I know when I was drinking in the middle of my addictions and stuff, I drove drunk, and how I never got caught or how I never got in an accident, it's a miracle because there are lots of times where I woke up and don't know how I got home and my car's in the driveway.
Yeah, I blacked out many times as well, Todd. And the interesting thing about it is that I was highly intoxicated when they took my blood. They drew my blood that night at the hospital, which was like an hour and a half later. It registered at 0.24, which means I was even more intoxicated than that at the time of the crash. But
Wow.
it seemed, as intoxicated as I was, like I had been more drunk on many other nights where I did make it home, but couldn't remember, like you said, couldn't remember how I had gotten home. So, when you think about it, like something like this, sadly, was bound to happen at some point with the way that I was doing it. How often I did it and how much I drank every single day before I would get behind the wheel of a car, my car. And it's I'm just my biggest regret. I wouldn't say the only regret. The biggest regret is obviously, I hate that two beautiful people had to lose their lives for me to finally figure it all out. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Actually, the very first episode of the podcast, like almost 3 years ago, it was someone localish around here, and same thing. He had taken a young lady's life drinking and driving, and yeah, it's it's just I don't know where I'm going with this, but um, yeah, it could have just as easily have been me that I had taken someone's life, and I thank God that I didn't hurt myself, but I just thank God I never hurt anybody else, because
Yeah.
that would have been, oh man, I can't imagine. Have you? Well, actually, the first guy, I can't think of his name now. All of a sudden, doesn't matter. Um, Go listen to episode 1, everybody. um, but he now goes around and he talks. He's like you, like he speaks about his experience with the father of the person whose life he ended up taking. I,
Wow.
yeah, I'm curious if you've been in touch with the family at all, or if they reached out to you, or and I mean, yeah, it's one thing, or is it, or were they related, the two people, or were they friends?
They were friends.
Oh,
As far as I
oh,
knew, that yeah, they were friends, and so that so let me just
two families then.
yes, entirely two three families because the guy who survived, he was well, I'll explain that in a
Sure,
second.
sure.
The so I learned about these people's lives about 3 or 4 days later after the crash. I'm in my cell, minding my own business. Someone slides the Oregonian newspaper underneath my door. I couldn't understand why. I didn't ask anybody to see a paper. I figured there must be something important in there that somebody wants me to read. So I pick it up, I begin to thumb through it, and I see my picture on the front page of one of the sections. And each paragraph that I read, these people's lives unfolded. And so now these are not just victims; these are people with lives and stories. And their story was that they were recovering addicts who had turned their lives around. They were now helping other people get clean and sober. They had like 16 years in recovery. They were volunteers with Volunteers of America. They worked with the Mothers Against Drunk Driving organization. They would watch women's children so that these ladies could attend AA and NA meetings. Like they were heavily involved in the recovery community in Portland at the time of their deaths. They were actually coming home that New Year's Eve night from a clean and sober New Year's Eve party at the Oregon Convention Center when they were struck and killed by a drunk driver. And the columnist who had written this article, he called it a palpable irony that these people who had devoted their lives to help people get clean and sober would have their lives cut short by a drunk driver. And then he said something at the end of the article, changed my life forever. He said, perhaps the person they will have ended up helping the most is the man who's charged with killing them. And it was such a heavy statement. And I didn't quite know how to make sense of it because, again, I'm 24 years old. I know I'm going to go to prison for almost 20 years. And I don't know how this situation is possibly going to help me. But I also knew that I couldn't ignore what he said. It was such a profound statement. So I had to kind of really dig down deep and get spiritual with it to try to ascertain what those words were supposed to mean for my life. And so for the next 7 or 8 months, I prayed about it. I meditated on that phrase. I would hear it when I would wake up. I would hear it when I'm walking the track outside. I would hear it when I'm laying my head down to go to sleep. And then it finally came to me that the only way this tragedy would not be in vain is if I carry on these people's legacies and if I literally make it my life's mission to do everything I possibly can to not just prevent drunk driving. Of course, I want to do that, but to help people who are struggling in active addiction so that they don't continue to cause harm to themselves, to their families, to their communities. And so I committed myself to the mission before I even knew what that would look like. I didn't know how that would manifest. I didn't know to what end I could do that while I was in prison. I don't know what programs were available, education. I didn't know any of it. I just knew I was committed. And so, to fast forward, when you ask, have I heard from So I made this. So at the sentencing, I made a vow to the family members and everybody that was there in attendance that I would spend the rest of my life doing this work. That was important for me to do. I didn't hear from anybody in their families until 16 years later when I was a little over a year away from release. So we're talking at the outset of the pandemic, March of 2020. I get a letter. I don't know who this person is, but I recognize the last name on the outside of the envelope. And so now my heart is in my stomach because I don't know what this letter is going to say. So I open up the letter.
Today's episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health is brought to you by Co-op. I've been a member of my local co-op, Sherwood Co-op, for, about 25 years, I think. My co-op is one of more than 150 local independent cooperative associations in more than 600 communities across Western Canada. Co-op is a different kind of business. It's not just a gas bar or a grocery store, although co-op is those things too. At its core, co-op is a group of people working together to help their neighbors and build their community. Co-op members are owners, and success is shared with everyone. Your co-op doesn't benefit one person or one corporation. Your co-op was built for everyone. Your co-op was built for your community. Learn more about co-op and find a location near you at coop.crs. One thing I've learned through my experience with mental health and addictions is you never know what you need to hear until you hear it. Make sure to rate and review on Apple and to tell as many people as you can about the podcast so others can hear something they need to hear from one of my guests. After all, this is a free mental health service, which is a rare thing, so why not share with as many people as you can?
It's 3 short paragraphs on a small little yellow notepad paper. She says who she is. She says who her mom is. And then she immediately went into saying, I can't help but to think about you guys who are locked up during this really tough time. It must be incredibly difficult for you. Let me know if I can send you toilet paper or food or money or anything to make life easier, basically, for you. She didn't mention anything about the crash. She didn't mention anything about how the last 16 years have been so difficult because her mom hasn't been there for milestones in her life. She didn't mention anything about, like, it was such a thoughtful, like, it, I don't even know how to describe it. Was like she is coming from she was only concerned about my well-being. The guy who took her mother from her when she was 18 years old. And so I had to sit with that letter for the next 2 or 3 days just to try to think about how I wanted to respond. Um, and so I composed like a 6 or 7 page letter, front and back. I detailed everything that I had done since the moment I stepped into state prison 16 years ago, because it was important for me to let her know that I wasn't just saying what sounded good to the courtroom on the day that I got sentenced. Like, this is my life now. This is my mission. This is my purpose. And so I needed to let her know everything I had done. By that point, I had gotten a master's degree in psychology. I had gotten certified as a recovery mentor. I got certified as a substance abuse counselor. I had written a couple books. I had begun to tell my story at DUI victim impact panels inside the prison, where they would bring uh, people from the community who had lost loved ones to DUI drivers and tell their story. And then one of us on the inside would tell our story. Um, and so I was committed to that. And I knew that once I got out of prison, I was going to likewise be committed to that work. So she gets the letter, she writes me back, and she says, Martin, this is the best possible outcome that my family and I could have hoped for. And we are so glad that you stayed true to your word and you're doing what you said you were going to do. And I'm going to share this with my family when I see them again. And we exchanged a couple more letters after that. I haven't heard from her since then, or since I've been out now 2.5 years. I haven't heard from anybody on that side. And I may never. And that's okay, because I feel like that exchange of 2 or 3 letters at the time was exactly what was supposed to happen, right? It gave me validation, Todd, that I didn't even know I needed. When she told me that this was the best possible outcome, and she thanked me for that, like, I can't even put into words how that felt. You know what I mean? And so
Hmm.
I'm so thankful for that. Like that family has been so just a beautiful, amazing family from the sentencing. Some of the things they said, they forgave me during the sentencing, which I didn't even. I hoped that that would happen at some point. I had no idea it was going to come during that time, and it did. And so it's just, I mean, I couldn't have asked for more, and I didn't deserve any of it, honestly.
Hmm. Wow, that's extremely humbling to have someone. That's such a selfless act to
Right,
reach out. One, not even mention the accident or anything that happened, and just offer support to you. And then, yeah, oh man,
right.
incredible. Um, so there is so people are pretty good in general. I
I
mean,
think so.
yeah,
I think so. I mean, I know we're inundated with things on the news that would say otherwise, but
exactly. Yeah,
man, there are some amazing, beautiful people on planet Earth, that show humility and grace and kindness, even in spaces where it's not deserved, frankly.
I don't know about that. I mean, it's easy for me to say, but I'm sure everybody deserves forgiveness, and yeah, everybody deserves
I like to think
empathy.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Um, have you ever reached out to the reporter that wrote that article?
I did. I reached out to that reporter. They are no longer there. They had forwarded the letter. So this is when I was still inside. I still had like maybe 2.5, 3 years left.
Hmm.
And another reporter picked up the letter and said, "Oh my God, I think there's a story here." So they contacted me. They came into the prison, did an interview with me, and then they wanted to actually come to sit in on one of the victim impact panels that I would be speaking at, so they could capture that side of it as well. Because the prison system is what it is, there was all this red tape. Because she had already been on my visitors list to visit me to do the initial interview, then she had to be off my visitors list for 90 days before she could come in to be in that setting. So it was just all this rigmarole, and it eventually fell through. So I haven't done any follow up interviews, with any news agencies around that, but you never know.
Hmm. Because even that line in the article, even that is showing empathy in a way. I mean, they didn't say, "I hope this guy burns in hell." It was like, "I hope this guy gets the help he needs as well."
No, it was pivotal. I mean, that was what really set everything into motion. That was what I needed to hear for me to go beyond just the tragedy of the circumstance and really figure out, what am I supposed to do with this now, right? Like, how do I turn this tragedy into something much more, something that's purposeful, something that honors my victims, right?
Hmm.
And so it was that statement. It was that statement that set everything into motion. And so it's, I tell that line whenever I speak because that was the pivotal moment for me.
Hmm. Um, and I mean, talking about mental health, what's it like being a black man in prison for 17 and a half years in America?
It can take a toll on you psychologically. It really can. And I was, thinking about this, earlier, when I knew I was coming on. And so prison institutions in general, well, I would say prison, not all institutions, but prison, I believe, at least the way I was made to feel, is designed to dehumanize its, residents. It is made to make you feel subhuman, and devalued. And I don't know if that's a way to psychologically control people so that you can, keep everything in order and keep the prison, functioning the way you need it to. But it is not good for the psyche. And so I had to, as somebody who struggled with depression over his sense of self, and had poor self-esteem and a low self-concept, I really had to push back psychologically against those forces. And so, for instance, when they they refer to you as your number, inmate 12664 175, or you hear 46B. So if I'm in cell 46 and I'm on the bottom bunk, right, I'm 46B. I'm not Martin. I'm not Mr. Lockett. I'm not Martin Lockett. I'm not Sir. I'm not. I am numbers, right? And so I had to kind of, when I would hear my number, from the officer being yelled out over the intercom, I would have to kind of tell myself, he's saying Martin. He's really saying Martin. It just sounds a little different, right? He's really saying Mr. Lockett. It just sounds a little different. Just so I wouldn't buy into this whole dehumanization, right, of myself. So many guys would normalize things in prison. So like canteen, they would say, "Oh, I'm going to the store," right? Or for the medical center, "Oh, I'm going to the hospital." Or for their cell, they would call it their house or their room, and for them, I guess that helped them to cope. But for me, it that would have been me allowing myself to become institutionalized. Like prison is already difficult enough mentally because you're isolated from your family, you're isolated from things that are familiar, right? You're referred to as a number more often than your name. You're wearing the same uniform as everybody else, so there's no individuality. All these things can take a serious toll on your mental health, on how you see yourself, how you perceive yourself, what your value is, what is your worth. Because if you buy into what the system tells you, you ain't worth crap, and
Mm-mm.
and you're gonna know every day that you're not worth anything. And so I had to kind of psychologically push back. I would not refer to anything as my house, the store, the hospital, because prison is not normal. It is not a normal setting, and I'm not going to normalize it. I am not. And so I kind of freed my mind by obviously my education, and I would read a ton of self help books and things like that. I would read inspirational books because it allowed me to get out of prison and to see myself. I would identify with some of these characters in these books, and I would see myself in their lives, and not as inmate 12664 175, but as the public speaker, the counselor, the person who inspires, the person who is spiritual. Like I would identify with all these different people and characters in these books, just to give myself some psychological relief.
Mm. I take it that's not common, or is it?
It is amongst those who have been in prison decades.
Mm.
So there's a vast difference between the guys who have been in prison 15, 20, 30, 40 years versus guys who are only coming in. I say only, I mean, if it's 18 months, that's 18 months of your freedom. So I'm not saying it's a small thing, it's a lot of time. But there's a different mentality with those guys because those guys, they're coming in and they know they're getting out, they're going back, like they're pretty much going to be almost the same age. The kids are still going to be like, life is still going to, it's not going to change that much. For guys who are coming in with sentences like mine, I'm not going home for the next 210 months. Like I have to find a way to see things different, right? And honestly, I tell this story sometimes. So when I got to prison in January of 2005, and I remember it was very cold, obviously. And I go outside. I'm bundled up. I got my beanie on. I got my jacket on. I'm walking around the track, and I'm just looking around to take in my surroundings. Guys are lifting weights, guys are playing sports, guys are walking the track, guys are on the phone, and I'm trying to figure out, how I had ended up in this situation. And I really kind of did an analysis of my life, and for the next hour, I'm just really delving deep into like where everything started for me. And I reached the conclusion, if I'm gonna leave prison a different person, and I don't know what that different person is going to look like, but it's got to be different than the way I've been going. Then something has to change, like within me. And then I realized that it's not just something that has to change, but everything has to change, because it wasn't merely just a bad choice that I made that led me to prison for 17 and a half years. It was a series of poor choices every single day, Todd. Getting behind the wheel to drink after I had drank every day was a poor choice. Going to the store and buying 4 24-ounce cans of beer every day was a poor choice, right? Going to clubs every weekend and drinking and taking home women and sleeping with them, it was all poor choices. It was me playing Russian roulette with my life and with other people's lives. When I'm on the road every day, it's not just me that I'm putting everybody's life in danger. And so once I realized that it was, it's a series of poor choices that I made. And so if I'm going to turn things around, I have to start making a series of good choices. I have to first of all understand my addiction from the beginning and where it all started for me, why I felt so low about myself, and honestly, it was a lack of an understanding of my culture, of my heritage, right? Because I used to feel ashamed that I was black, right? And before I knew, like, what my heritage was, and the lineage of people that I come from. And so I had to educate myself. I read a lot of books, and man, it just like I was just so um inspired and renewed and empowered, and so today, like, I love who I am as a black man in America. Yeah, we have struggles and we have things pushing against us, but like, I wouldn't change me for anybody in the world, man.
Hmm.
I wouldn't at all.
That's you're a miracle.
Okay.
Well, that's what my counselor at the addiction treatment center I went to would always say. Said, "You guys are in here right now. You're all miracles. You've made it. You
I'll
made it
take it.
here. You're in a place of healing now." So,
That's
yeah,
right.
that's amazing. This segment is called "That Some Bunny Special." It's a segment where we chat about who cooperated in your mental health journey and helped fill your emotional tank. Brought to you by Co-op. So through this whole through your whole life, I guess, or in your darkest times, who would you say was there for you that you want to give a shout out to?
I mean, none of this would have happened if it was not for my fiance that I met literally a year and a half into my prison sentence. So I still had 16 years left. I met this amazing woman. She, um, you know, talked to me about my goals and how I wanted to spend my time in prison. And frankly, she believed in me before I believed in myself. At that point, I didn't have a whole lot of reason to believe in myself, but she saw something in me. So she supported my goals. She helped me to get connected, to these universities that I began to take courses from outside of the prison. I literally hand wrote my first book in my prison cell. She typed it all out, got it all manuscript, formatted, reached out to the publishing company. I mean, just everything is attributed to her. And so definitely shout out to her. And then a guy I consider a mentor, sponsor, just all around fantastic human being. He was my clinical director that when I went through the program inside the prison, the 7 month treatment program, then I began to work for him to get the hours to get certified and all that. Um, Ricardo, he has got like 37 years clean and sober. Started this program about 25 years ago inside the prison. Man, he has helped countless guys get their lives back.
Mm.
And he's so wise, and so he's even helped me since I've been out of prison now for 2.5 years with some things. So huge shout out to him as well for getting me to where I am today.
Those are two good ones, real good ones.
Yes, I would say so.
So, was the last time you drank that night of the accident?
Yes, it was January 1st of 2004.
Damn, damn.
Yeah.
Hmm. I kind of remember what I was going to say before. Have you seen the documentary 13th? It's about the 13th Amendment.
Yes, I am familiar. I have not seen it, but I'm glad you reminded me, because when I was inside, I told myself when I get out, I really want to see that.
It is shocking. I mean,
That's what I
I,
heard.
as a Canadian, especially because it's like we're very close. culturally
Right.
and stuff. So it's to like the prison system in America is just it's astronomical. It's I don't want to use the word insane, but it is crazy.
Well, it is. I mean, it really is. And I read the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and I think the movie is
Mm,
is largely synonymous with that and how the 13th Amendment was designed, basically to create this system of mass incarceration and free labor and slave labor, basically, right within the
yeah,
prison system. And you talk about the prison industrial complex. That's a whole other podcast that could be done on that
yeah,
seriously. But like you have
yeah.
these enterprises, these private corporations coming into prisons, contracting with the prisons, the inmates. We think it's the greatest job ever because we get to make $150 to $250 a month, which is unheard of in prison. The average salary is about $35 to $38 a month. So when you're working these jobs, they have call centers set up in prison. I worked for the Oregon DMV. So you have people calling to get their licenses renewed, their cars registered. They're talking to a prisoner. They don't know they're talking to a prisoner, but they're talking to a prisoner on the computer, getting things set up for them because they get to pay us $150 a month as opposed to paying somebody actual wages, right? And it's just, I mean, multi millions and billions of dollars come through the prison industrial complex, for profiteering, for capitalists.
God, unreal,
Yeah.
man. If you don't
Okay.
mind talking about what you've been up to for the last 2.5 years, and especially the last month or 2 months.
Sure. So when I got out in 2021, I started working at Lines for Life, which is a substance use mental health organization in Portland. And basically, so we take all the 988 suicide prevention or suicide crisis line calls in the state of Oregon. We have the drug and alcohol helpline. We have the military helpline for veterans who are struggling. We have the senior loneliness line. We have the youth line. So basically, we have numerous crisis lines to meet people's individual needs. And I am the director of cultural engagement with Lines for Life, where I run a small team. We go into the Portland metro area. We specifically talk to Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks about mental health issues, substance use issues, try to have a normal conversation because we know it's still very much stigmatized. And so once we can kind of make some inroads with that, then we offer them culturally responsive mental health and substance use resources. So that is something I've only been doing that for about a month and a half. I was promoted to that role. Before that, I took calls on the drug and alcohol line. And so for people in Oregon, when you get cited with a small amount of drugs, it's no longer criminalized. You get a citation. You call. You would call me or one of my colleagues. We would do a screening with you over the phone, and then we would try to get you connected, if you were willing, try to get you connected to substance use resources in your area. And so that work is still happening. I'm just not directly a part of it as I'm running this small team now in the
Mm,
community. So that's what I do in my day job. Privately, I speak around the country at DUI victim impact panels. I have a remote one tonight in about an hour and 50 minutes. And to first time DUI offenders, I speak at alcohol highway safety classes. I speak in high schools, I speak at colleges, and I speak at conferences. A lot of the conferences I do are law enforcement conferences with uh, drug recognition expert officers and DUI officers and probation officers, parole officers, things like that. And I share my story and then of course thank them for the work that they are doing to keep us all safer. And um, yeah, so I do a lot of public speaking.
man, that's incredible. That you just came out of prison with all the credentials already there, plus the life experience, and you just got to work right away.
I did, and I'm a huge, huge, huge believer, Todd, in the laws of attraction. I don't know if you've seen the documentary, read the book, The Secret, but I
Hmm.
because for years when I was inside and I'm walking around the track, I'm envisioning myself speaking in front of these audiences. I'm envisioning myself, working with clients privately, which is another thing I do. I work for a mental health organization down in Atlanta, Georgia. They get clients referred through their jobs, and then I will work with them remotely on a private, privately. And so I envision all these things happening. So when I got out, that my energy went toward that, right? My energy went, I had already seen it. I had already, envisioned it, and I knew it was going to happen. It was just about a matter of me now physically getting out and connecting the dots. And so all these doors are opening. And once you kind of put yourself in these spaces, you meet other people, they get you connected. And so it just kind of organically happens. But, people ask me where sometimes, are you surprised at all, you're having this success? Like, I'm very humbled. I'm very grateful, but I'm not surprised because I knew 10 years ago when I was in prison, 12 years ago, 13, I knew it was going to happen because I saw it. And that's what I put my energy into. And nobody was going to convince me that it wasn't going to happen.
So you've manifested your own destiny now.
Yes, indeed.
Amazing. Right on. I love it. I appreciate all the work you're doing. And, I said I'm sorry that you went through all this. And of course, I'm sorry for the people that lost their lives as well. But it's just, you've got an incredible story. And I just appreciate you and all the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Todd. And I appreciate you and for you sharing stories, very, a diverse arrangement of stories, right? Because I think all of our stories matter and they all have value and they're all going to resonate differently with people out there in your audience. And so thank you for the work that you're doing to highlight mental health. I love how you can be very funny about it sometimes. You're
listen.
Very open. Oh, yes, I listen.
Okay.
You are quite the character. But this helps to normalize these conversations, right? They don't always have to be so, uptight and serious. And yeah, they're serious, but like we can normalize it as well and bring more people into the fold and have conversations around how to get people help. So thank you for the unique spin that you put on it.
Well, thank you. I don't take compliments well, so I thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Martin. You're such an amazing guy and an inspiration. I hope people are listening to you and taking your advice and taking your wise words and your experiences to heart. Martin and I tried to record quite a while back, and well, without going into too much detail, I dropped the ball a little bit, so it was nice that we were able to finally do it. And you can follow Martin on Instagram. I will put all that in the show notes. And yeah, he's also written, he's an author, so you can find his books and all types of stuff there. You can hire him as a speaker, and just go check it out. So if you've been listening for a while, you know that I've been teasing a major announcement for the podcast, and I'm still teasing. I'll tell you this. There's going to be a second episode a week coming soon and consistently, and it's going to be co-hosted, and that's all I'll tell you for now. But it's going to be great. We've recorded a couple episodes already, and we've been working really hard, so hopefully we can start releasing those episodes soon and make it the announcement, but stay tuned. It's a good one. But anyway, thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. I haven't decided. Maybe I'll throw a midweek one here coming up. My personal life's been a little bananas lately, so it all depends on how much time I have. Plus, it's the holidays coming up and stuff. So, but don't be surprised. There could be an episode in the middle of the week here. But anyway, until next time, please remember to make your beds and take your meds. Bye.